Hey, welcome to Other Fathers. This is a podcast that exists to initiate honest conversation around fatherhood. And for this episode, I sat down with my friend Hakeem Bradley. And for this episode, it's all about healing the generational wounds we experience as dads, learning that we don't have to recreate the patterns that our fathers did, and that we can actually heal what has been broken in our lives and the lives of others around us. And so Hakeem had such good insight to share in this episode, and it was beautiful to just take part in this conversation with him. And I'm hoping it's insightful for you as well. And so without further ado, let's get to the podcast. Well, first things first, man, Hakeem Bradley, you're one of the few guys I've connected with over the phone. I'm like, this guy gets it. From your energy to your excitement to everything on that phone call, man. And when I think of you, bro, the phrase that comes to mind from all your writing and all the things that you've been putting out there with Bible Project, with your blog, the phrase I get for you is like poet scholar. You know what I'm saying?
Hey, I'll take it, bro. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And man, as we were just talking about, really big reason why I'm excited for this conversation with you, bro, is just based on just following you on Instagram, connecting with you through that, kind of the similarities we have in the brotherhood, the younger brotherhood, the bigger brotherhood.
Yeah.
Man, I just love witnessing from the sideline how connected and tethered you are to fatherhood. I think above all things that struck me as the most significant and as the biggest. And dude, the really premise of this, as I was saying, is to really offer that voice to dads out there who may not have had somebody growing up to really show them the ropes of fatherhood, to really step into and be a voice for different individuals who kind of may have been thrown into fatherhood, maybe signed up for it willingly, but didn't know what they were getting themselves into.
Man, come on, bro. That's a message right there. Come on.
Yes, dude. And just for your story, bro, I just resonated so deeply with so many things you had to say of healing and the process and the journey. And so I'd love to start off our time together by you just sharing a little bit of kind of where you grew up, how you grew up, who you grew up around, and really what your story is, bro.
Yeah. Well, one, thanks for being down to chit chat again. Really appreciate that, man. And poet scholar, bro. That is.
Yes, bro.
I might have to brand that, bro. Come on, man. I'm gonna give you your royalties, though.
No, you can have it, bro. You can have it.
But I grew up in Philly, born and raised there up until the 8th grade. And so I was born to a teen mom during her senior year of high school. My parents were never married, were boyfriend and girlfriend for about 5 years. Their relationship was pretty toxic. You got two young people. Mom comes from a divorce or a relatively new divorce family at that time. My dad was the product of two non-married peoples, and his experience with his father wasn't the greatest at all. He didn't even really have a relationship with his dad. And so you got these two young folks coming together. They had me, but I had an older sister by my dad from a different mom. And so growing up in a more impoverished area, violent-filled, areas of Philly, it's just an environment that I don't think would be conducive to people's flourishing, if that's the right word. I'm trying to expand my vocabulary, as we can see. But it's not a place where humans really flourish. And yet, somehow, some way, God was gracious enough with me and with other people, a bunch of friends and family, that I had the opportunity to grow up around. Like, I grew up around my great-grandparents. I even knew a great-great-grandmother. Grew up around my grandparents, mainly my dad's mom and then my mom's mom. My grandmothers were pivotal. I am the result of their prayers. That's how I like to summarize my life. And I grew up as what is called a 5%er. It's like a black ideological kind of like identity cult, to put it nicely. And we believed Christianity was the white man's religion. The Bible was oppressive, yada, yada. That was mainly a thing from my pops. And my mom grew up in a Christian context, but then when she became in relationship with my dad, she switched over to that ideology. So I grew up in that, man. That is the air I breathed. Violence, poverty, 5% nation. It kind of had somewhat of an Islamic bent, so I didn't eat pork, Skittles, and all of that stuff. But then I moved to Portland when I was going into the 8th grade. And why did we move there? My mom's dad lived out there. He was like, y'all should come on out here because Philly was wild. I'm telling you,
Mm.
wild. And so we made that move, and I was like, Mom, that's a terrible idea. Like, I visited Portland a couple times when I was a kid, and I was like, bruh, this is a bad idea. But long story short, man, I was there for 14 years, and that place formed me for the better and for the worse in some ways. To learn how to not shy away from who I am culturally. Because going from Philly to Portland was like cultural shock, even though we're
Yeah.
still in the same country. I'm like a
Mm.
black dude in a predominantly white space, and I was like, man, where we at, yo? Like, what's going on? So, um, it just it was a lot of challenges when we got there. We were houseless for a year, and then we found my mom got a job. We moved to a suburb called Portland. I've lived in every quadrant of Portland though, but then we lived in a suburb called
Wow.
Beaverton. And once I got into
Mm-hmm.
high school, my life kind of took off for the better, and I got introduced to Jesus when I was a preteen. But I really got introduced by a guy named Phil Zahn, who was an area director for Young Life.
Yeah.
And I was in a junior in high school, approached me at a soccer game, and it's been history ever since. And what compelled me about Jesus was not the theology, not the Bible scriptures that were quoted by my Young Life leaders or whatever. It wasn't even the churches that I became a part of over time. It was the fact that I watched Phil live his life. I saw how he became a dad. I saw how he navigated being a young dude married. Him and I are 10 years apart. And so I got to see how he was with his friends. He invited me everywhere. We would just go to the gas station, to a coffee shop, to run little errands. He's like, hey man,
Mm.
like you want to come with me? Or I'll just go
Yeah.
to his house and he'll teach me how to play the guitar. I'll watch him navigate life with his dog. We'll go on a walk. We'll just do all of these things. I'll go to the office with him just to go pop in and grab a document that he needed for work. It's the little
Mm.
things. I got to see so much of the intimate spaces of his life. And I
Yeah.
was like, if this is what following this Jesus dude is like,
Mm.
and then I want to do that. And the irony is that I believed it was a white man's religion, and yet I'm being formed by a white believer who taught me
Mm.
more about Jesus than anybody that I can kind of name up to this day, even because he and I are still in, constant relationship. And so that's the nutshell. That's first half of my life in
Mm.
Philly, second half was in Portland, but now my wife and I live in Atlanta with our two kids. Got married
Mm.
right out of college. Married almost 7 years, 4-year-old son almost, and a 1-year-old daughter, man. And I'm
Yeah.
chilling. Used to be a pastor for a while, so I'm giving like a whole spiel. Uh,
Yeah.
used to be a pastor for a while. Stepped away from vocational ministry. Work at a joint called Bible Project now, where I get to just
Mm.
be a professional Bible nerd, and I'm coasting,
Yes.
man, coasting. So
Poet scholar, bro.
listen, I take that. So that's the gist, man.
Yeah.
Of an intro, I guess, or a long-winded intro.
Mm. No, man. I mean, the floor is yours, bro. I think your voice and who you are has so much to add to so many lives.
Mm.
And as much as you want to give a TED talk, man, the floor is yours as much as you want, dude. Like that is all good. I love how you shared about transitioning to a new place, and it
Mm.
sounded like a person who had no pretense about them, a person who wasn't showing anything, was just literally showing you the intimate parts of their life.
Yeah,
And it
yeah,
sounds like that is what compelled you to follow Jesus. And I think that's so essential, man, just to all modes and areas of life.
yeah.
And I think that even just captures the vision of what we're doing right now of
Hmm.
kind of this unscripted monologue esque conversation of really just not trying to put any filters on it, not trying to be any kind of way with it, but
Yeah,
really unfolding the inner parts of our lives to people.
yeah.
And I love that that's so embedded into your story.
Mm.
And I'm really fascinated, man, of what was your, we haven't talked about this yet, but um, what was really your idea and line of thinking as you're getting married and then eventually becoming a father? Was that
Mm.
something that you always saw for yourself, particularly in the realm of fatherhood? Was it something that you felt like, some guys you talk to them, they're like, bro, I was made for this, and they knew it was coming down the pipeline. They're excited. Where
Yeah,
others of us, we may be a little intimidated at the idea of becoming a
yeah,
father. And
yeah,
as we're talking about either knowingly or unknowingly, many of us are tossed into that. And no matter how much you can prepare, there's nothing you can really do to set yourself up to
Yeah,
literally steward and take care of and form another person. Like that is just a wild concept. You talk a lot
thousand
about
percent.
flourishing, and I'd love to touch on that as well. But really, what was your mindset coming into fatherhood?
Yeah, so yeah, when I got married, I always was excited about the idea of family, and even before that, because I wanted to participate in God's redemption of my family history, and I wanted to be
Yeah,
active about that.
yeah,
I don't come from parents who were married.
mm,
My dad didn't come from parents who were married. I don't know about that line. My mom came from parents who were married, and their parents were married, and da 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 da. As far as we could trace back, but I wanted to really go, okay, God, how do I participate in changing the narrative of divorce lines or um, non-unified households?
mm, yeah,
How do I help my family line and the kids that I would hope to have one day? How can I participate in that? And so, first avenue, I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna get married. I'm gonna find a nice, kind, humorous, beautiful woman, and hopefully she like me, and I wanna get married. And so I met my wife at
yeah,
19, and what compelled me about her was not only, yeah, oh, she's beautiful or she's smart or she's goofy or whatever. It was, I saw how she treated kids. I said, okay,
mm,
that's a good quality. Um, she was fascinated by kids and would always talk about how she longed and wanted to be a mom. And so when we got married, we just were like, all right, it's only a matter of time. I never thought I was
mm,
made to be a dad. I was always nervous about becoming a dad because
mm,
I didn't want to repeat the things that I experienced in the broken relationship with my dad growing up, which was a roller coaster. And we'll talk about that more. But
yeah,
I said, you know what? You can't participate in redeeming something if you don't do it, at least in this context. And so it's like, all right. And lo and behold, man, we just was like, all right, well, we're gonna try for a kid, a couple of years after we got, and then that's how Ezekiel came into the world. Born the week before COVID shut the world down, dog. It was crazy.
wow,
So we walked into the hospital. They was like, my wife's having contractions in the car, right? And then they're
yeah.
like, hey, do you have any symptoms? I'm like, symptoms of what? What are you talking about? They're like, any fevers, any coughs, any. I'm like, yo, can we
Yeah.
go upstairs? Having no idea what was going on in the world. I just was like, no, like she is
Yeah,
having contractions. This baby is on its way. So can we please leave?
yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, I would never say I thought about, yeah, I'm made to be a dad. Um, it was more so of an active thought of like, I want to be a good dad, however that
mm,
turns out. And so
yeah,
Jazz made that a reality for me. And
mm,
yeah, man, it's been a roller coaster in
yeah,
in the best ways and the not so glamorous ways.
mm,
Best ways in the sense of like I genuinely enjoy my kids.
mm,
I've never been so emotional in my life. I didn't cry when they were born. Weirdly, I thought I would
mm,
be bawling. I
yeah,
cry more so when like my son will grab my leg if I'm feeling down and he'll just be like, "It's okay, Dad," and I'm just like, "What?
oh,
Okay, okay, son." Those things,
yes,
and I'm just like, you don't even have a clue what's going on. You just recognize my
mm,
aura was different, and so you
mm,
just found comfort in that. Or he'll just say things, and from you go, "Dad, I love you. Like you're my favorite dad in the world," and I'm like, "Thanks,
yeah,
son." And then my daughter has this look. Um, that I'm just like, oh, you know I'm your dad and I got your back.
yeah,
Okay, cool. I live for
yeah,
these moments. And the not
yeah,
glamorous moments is revealing how selfish, how intro, inner, overly inner focused that I can be, how
mm,
stressful life can get, how I can allow money to be an idol because I'm so,
mm,
worried about providing for them and so
mm,
many things get exposed about my downfalls that I'm like,
mm,
oh, this ain't glamorous, but it's all been contributing to my formation as a father. And yeah, I would say that's the intro into my fatherhood. It's still relatively new.
mm,
It's only 4 years old,
yeah,
but The precursor to having my own kids was being a youth pastor for some years. Like that was I was able to go, okay, how do I pour into a generation that's following me? And they kind of taught me things about doing so that now I get to do with my own kids. And so they were the seed bearers, so to speak, of what
Yeah.
my kids get to reap right now in some ways. You know, the best and the worst of me. So I think
Yes.
that answers the question.
Yes, man. I mean, beautifully so it answers the question, man. And I'm so fascinated by what you're talking about in regards to how children and just those relationships reveal the really deep parts of who we are.
Mm.
Um, it can feel so can make you feel so vulnerable, man.
Bruh,
It can make you feel like
daily, daily,
your whole
dog.
life is just cut open for everybody like a live autopsy or something, man. It is.
Yes, sir.
Oh man.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And when you first kind of started experiencing that, what was your immediate reaction to kind of realizing like, man, the things I say, how I act, what I'm doing,
Mm,
I mean, little people are picking up on it.
mm,
And you said your son's 4. Is he beginning already to kind of mimic behavior, mirror you at all, or is he
thousand
just his
percent.
entirely own
No,
individual?
he is a mirror, bro. There are certain words and phrases that my son will just say that I'm like, only I talk like that in this household.
Mm,
Okay, that is wild.
yeah.
Or I feel like that's flattering sometimes. I'm just like, oh, you picked up on something that you hear me say often, so you're really observant.
Mm,
Okay. And then on other times, I'm like, you're being
mm,
reactive to a situation, like how I would be reactive to a
yeah.
situation instead of quote unquote
Yeah.
responding. And yeah, man, you see where your sin
Mm,
lies very
yeah.
fast. Um, but I also see how my son is very caring towards his sister and his
Mm,
mom. And I try my best to be publicly affectionate toward his mom
yeah.
in front of him, to be like, yeah, it's okay to like love a
Yeah.
woman and hug her and hold her and give her a
Yeah.
kiss and just sit there and listen or playfully mess
Mm,
with her. And he's a goofy
yeah.
kid, so he picks up on all
Yeah.
of that, and he's very tender and affectionate towards his sister, to the point where she like pushes him off, and then I'm just like, hey man, she that's her saying get off me, dog. But he's like, I just love my sister so much. And so
Yeah.
I would say those are some mirror aspects that I've been able to notice more often. And he's having his own little personality starting to
Yeah.
flare up. I'm like, oh, you're like an individual. Okay. You have thoughts and opinions that aren't completely formulated, but you got some things that you want to
Yeah.
say and let us know. And he's a really inquisitive kid. And so I'm having the privilege of learning from
Mm,
him what my parents learned from
yeah.
me. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? As far as you just find out things about yourself, but you learn how to love another individual well that you can't be separated from relationally. Even the dynamics of you know splits between parents and kids in all types of
Mm,
ways. I get all of that. I'm just saying this kid he's attached to me forever somehow, some way, and so yeah, he's teaching me how to navigate that line in the relationship that he and I have.
yeah.
And so, yeah, man. I hope this is
Yeah.
making
It
sense.
does, man.
Just,
And
just talking.
I love what you're saying about how you started realizing things about yourself through becoming a parent, and then it made you reflect
Hmm.
on your parents. Um, in that process and journey, kind of thinking back on how you grew up, what your parents were
Yeah.
like, their mistakes, their successes. For some people, I've seen that makes them a little bit resentful. Like, um,
Mm.
you hear different things like parents really raise you with what they know, and when we feel as if we've been raised in a specific context or in a way that we may have not liked, I'm speaking for
Yeah.
myself here, it can be very easy to then set ourselves up to almost be like the better parent. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
did,
I'm gonna be better than
yeah,
them.
like i
Yep.
i would never, or
Hmm.
I'm gonna be nothing like, or all the phrases, right?
Yeah.
For you, in what you've shared so far of your story, did you ever encounter any of
Hmm.
that in becoming a dad and looking back on how you interacted with your dad in that dynamic?
Yeah, yeah. It's a great question. One, I would say I love how you
Mm,
phrase it, like the resentment piece
mm,
where you go, "I'll never be
yeah.
like that." Man, if there was a what is the word I'm looking for? Not a mantra. Um, if there was a what is it called when you're living by a quote? You're like, this is my
Forearm
my
tattoo,
thing.
bro. Just kidding.
This is like it. Like I'll never be
I
like
hear
that, right? Like it was my
you. Yeah.
motto throughout my adolescence for sure. Because the reality is, I idolized my dad when I was a kid, even though he didn't live with us after I was 5. Had some fractures in our
Yeah.
relationship. And when I reflected on he and my mom's relationship, I built a resentment
Mm,
up that turned into a greater
mm,
resentment when I was moving to Portland. He and I had a conversation, and me informing him that I was moving, and it didn't go
mm,
well at all. And so after that, I was like, "Nah, I don't need you, bro.
yeah.
Like, I'm not gonna call, I'm not gonna text. I don't need you. I'm gonna figure this out by myself." And so, you learn how to shave by yourself. Not to quote Fresh Prince, but you learn how to take girls out on a
Yeah.
date. You learn how to do all of this by yourself,
Mm,
um, or won't receive anything that my dad tried to give me. I was like, I ain't hearing none of
mm,
that, bro. And so throughout high school, you know, I can't even count the times on my hands where I was like, I'm gonna call my dad because I need
mm,
this. Like it wasn't even that many times. It was just like, nah, like I'm really. It's just a hard resentment. I was hard
yeah.
hearted, and so, uh, man, how do I summarize everything that's going on in my head? I'll just say, when I became a dad, when I got married, or right before I was getting married, is when we had like a great reconciliation. I
Mm,
went back to visit in Philly. We had a heart to
yeah.
heart, and it was like a okay. We had heart to hearts over the phone, and it was real helpful. But when he came to my wedding, that was the point where I was like, I only got one dad,
Mm,
and he's here, he's alive, he wants to be a part of my life, and who am I to hold this grudge against him that he doesn't even know that I have?
wow.
Who am I? But it wasn't until I became a dad that I was able to understand. Oh, yeah, you didn't have your
Mm,
father. You were just figuring it out as you went, and you were younger than me when you had kids. So how much how much more development did you need to
mm,
go through as a young man to be a better equipped dad? Like you went through it very, very young. And
yeah.
so I would go, it wasn't until like this last year that I really had, I think, the deepest reflection on my relationship with my dad when I said, man, you really only fathered me with the tools that you
Yeah.
had. You did your best. Um, and I told him this. I called him. I said, hey man, I judged you way too long.
Mm,
And I follow this rabbi who talks about not judging with a plank in my eye, but I'm so busy looking at the speck in yours. And I didn't realize how long I've been having this plank in my eye.
mm,
And I owe you an apology for holding all of that against you.
wow.
And yeah, man, we had a heart to heart over the phone. I said, Pop, there's a lot I didn't understand, and there's a lot that I don't understand, and there's a lot that is not my business to
Mm,
understand. But what I do understand is that you're
mm,
here, you love me, I love you, and I'm gonna capitalize
yeah.
on that. Because the tragedy is my stepfather passed away a couple
Mm,
years ago. I have multiple siblings, but the other sibling from my mom, he's 8 years younger than me, and so his father is the one that passed away a couple years ago, tragically, and out of the blue, right when he was graduating high school. And so that also set a different mentality where I'm like, oh shoot, like Big Mike not here no
mm,
more, okay, but my dad is still here. It would be stupid for me not to appreciate the fact that my biological father is still
yeah.
here when my brother can't even call his no more. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And so yeah, man, I would say I got really humbled
Mm,
really quickly when I was allowing myself to reflect and just listening to my dad. We talk more. We're closer now than we were when I was a kid. I was
mm,
like, man, even though I idolized him, we lived, miles apart from each other. But now we live, at the time in Portland, we lived 3,000 miles away. Now we live about 1,000 something now. And I'm like, bro, we closer than we've ever
yeah.
been. And I just listened to him. I listened to his grievances. I listened to the struggles that he encountered, things, stories, just story after story after story. And I'm like, man, stories really do provide they really cultivate the ground for your heart to change, the soil of your heart to change towards somebody. And yeah, I've hey, Nick, we've had conversations where, you know, I'm crying on one line of the phone, he's crying on the other line of the
Mm.
phone. And that was something that I never thought we would ever
Yeah.
experience. But it's by God's grace, man, that there's healing, I think, for
Mm.
him as well as me. And not just our relationship, but that has kind of spurred conversations, I think, with my other siblings that he has as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, man, not to say like, oh, man, I broke the soil for all of
Yeah.
them. But I do think God has allowed me to have specific conversations with my dad that helps him have better conversations with my other siblings or to create better boundaries with my other
Yeah.
siblings, which helps me think about how I want to interact with my kids and when I wound them,
Mm.
because I will. That's just the inevitable reality of being outside of Eden. But when I wound them, I want them to be able to tell me sooner. To be like, Dad, this is something that you said, something that you've done. It's just a way that you are that is
Mm.
hurtful, and you should repent of this.
Mm.
Like, okay, cool,
Yeah.
sorry. Because my dad has apologized for things. And he's like, man, I never should have said X, Y, and Z. I should have
Mm.
never did X, Y, and Z. And apologies between parent and child is something that I didn't grow up
Yeah.
with, but in my adulthood, it's been greatly healing in a lot of ways. So yeah, man, I think that answers the
Dude, there's so much good stuff to get into, man. Oh my goodness. I want to go back to you talking about that phone call when you guys moved, and you said he was kind of in and out
yeah.
of the house, not really around. Um,
Mm.
what was it for that phone call of him saying, "Yeah, that's a bad idea. Don't do that," so on and so forth? What was it about that that created that resentment for you, or was that kind of something that there was other things already building up in your heart, and it was just kind of the final strike for him?
Yeah, I would say it was a building up because I was physically with him in the car when I told him I was moving to
Mm,
Portland. And yeah, we were physically together. And it was kind of the camel that broke the straw's
yeah.
back. I grew up like really as a mama's
Yeah.
boy, for one, being in a single parent household. And so anything my mom said, it was like
Yeah.
law. It was like law as far as me believing it. I was like, oh, that's true. That's the real
Yeah.
story. And as I've gotten older, I'm just like, hold on, wait a minute. Like there's a fuller context of what happened and what went
Yeah.
down. And there's certain things that I shouldn't have known as a kid
Mm,
anyway, because it would have been inappropriate for me to know. And it wasn't my business between what happened
yeah.
between them two. But the older I've gotten, my dad would share more. He's like, yeah, man, this is where I was wounded in our relationship. And I'm
Mm,
like, man, I used to just think you was the devil in certain
yeah.
ways. I'm just like, bro, you just was
Yeah.
evil for them. And I'm like, oh no, like it's a fuller
Yeah.
picture. And so, but as a kid, my mentality was just so shifted around. Well, mommy said
Mm,
this. This is what I saw her feel. This is when I seen her cry. This is when I seen her be
mm,
frustrated. And so that's from a little kid up until my teenage years where I was just like, man. So when we had that conversation in the car, I really was like, all right, cool. Then that's
yeah.
it. I'm done. I don't need this. And I wish there was a way for me to have had a better understanding at that time
Yeah.
because I think I missed out even though I was 3,000 miles away from my dad in my adolescence into my young
Yeah.
adulthood. I would say I wish I knew better.
Mm,
And you can't change that. You can't change it nor can you expect a teenager to be able to hold the tensions of
yeah.
everything. But that's just a reflection. So I'm trying to prevent that with my kids to the best of my ability by being
Mm,
proactive, you know. Um, and my wife will check me on things and I'm just doing terribly. And I find myself repeating patterns from my
yeah.
parents, right? And I'm just going, oh Lord, no,
Yeah.
let's not go that way. So I could say as much as I wanted to as a teenager of I'll never be that way. I'll never do that. I'll never say this, that, and the
Yeah.
third. And it's like, bruh, you better get humble real
Yeah.
quick. You are an organism. You are a creature of repetition and
Yeah.
imitation. And so I'm trying to. That's why I need a Phil's on in my life
Mm,
to show me a different way of parenting.
yeah.
That's why I needed, friends who had kids who I could watch them and be around their dads. And um, yeah, I just would. try to be around as many fathers as I could
Mm,
be. And luckily, I had a close friend in high school. His name was Joey Losk, and his dad, Scott Losk, was like my white
mm,
dad for all of high school and college, man.
mm.
Fed me, talked to me, gave me wisdom, all of that. And when I got into vocational ministry, I had mentors who were like father
Yeah,
figures, the Eric Knoxes, Josh Butlers, all of
yeah,
them, Tim McDonald's, the John Marks, all of them. Like they were all fatherly in different ways. And
yeah,
so I think that has been the proactivity of the spirit in my life.
yeah. Man, we're really getting to, I believe, the heart of this conversation, which is the whole reason we're talking, which is for those listening in, those finding out about this, those looking for that voice in their life, and not
Mm,
immediately having it. I think this conversation, what you're offering, is speaking directly into that reality for so many dudes.
mm,
Um, and you kind of answered the question already, but I'm really fascinated to dig a little deeper here of like, how
yeah.
do you, when things are brought up, that you begin to notice those patterns? How, first of all, did you begin seeing that those are patterns that you carried on? I think it's so hard to look outside ourselves and look outside of stuff that we consider normal, right? Like
Mm,
perspective or
mm,
perception's reality, right? So it's like, oh, this is just the way it is. I always think of it the way
mm,
like uh, how you may talk in your home and then you go to a friend's house and then see how your friends talk to their parents. You're like, oh no,
bro.
that would never
Yep.
happen in my
Yep.
household. I'd be
I'll
in
be
my
like,
room.
bro, you would have got smacked, dog. What's wrong with you?
I know my face would be in a corner if I was talking like you
Bro,
right now. And so
reckless.
I'm really curious about that. You know, you mentioned mentors and people kind of stepping in,
Yeah.
but was that first a journey
Yeah.
for you to begin that self confrontation of, you know, thankfully for followers of Jesus, you know, we have that conviction of the Holy Spirit. Um,
Hmm.
but for you, what was the beginning of that journey of recognizing those patterns?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. I think I've always had friends who would be like, "Hey, bro, you
Mm,
tripping?" And I'll just be like, "What you mean?" Even before I became a dad, it's like, "Hey, bro, you
yeah,
tripping?" I'm like, "What am I tripping on?" And just having people to point out my blind spots of my behaviors and patterns was
yeah,
helpful as a
yeah,
teenager. And as I got older, it was like, okay. And then when I became a dad, it was my wife has been like a big um, vessel for the spirit to convict me and stuff.
mm.
Cause she'll just be like, why did you even
Oh,
respond that
dude,
way?
shout out
Or
to the wives, man.
why, bro, for real, bro? Or like, why does it make you
Yeah,
upset when Easy does this
yeah,
thing? Or
wow,
why do you kind of get all tensed up when everything's a mess in this space?
yeah,
Like that's the nature of the
yeah,
game. And those questions, in general, I'm not really much of a defensive
mm,
person, but it will make me go like, oh, like at first my response might have been like, no, I'm not doing nothing wrong. Like I would think this internally, and then I would really have an introspective moment of like, why do I? Why does that bother me? Like why? Yeah, I am tripping. Okay.
mm,
So then from there, once I'm cognizant of it and it's brought to my awareness by Jazz, I'm able to go, okay, how do I
yeah,
adapt to the best of my ability? And when I'm not, when I sink back into my unawareness, like keep bringing it up, keep bringing it up. So I would say she's a big thing, and I would also point to biology. My brain has been fully developed for some years now, so I'm able to think
you made it
about
on the
things
other
a lot
side, bro. You
more.
did it.
I made it on the other side, and so um, I would say I'm able to stop and think
Huh?
more, even before something
Yeah,
happens, just to go, okay, I'm aware of the scene that I'm in. Like I'll know if my son or daughter, and I'm like, I can low key kind of predict what they're about to
yeah,
do. And if I go, okay, if they do that thing, how will you
mm,
respond? Are you gonna be sharp? You gonna be quick? Are you gonna be stern? You gonna be firm? Is your voice gonna be a little higher, like, hey? Or is it gonna be like, hey man, like why are you? Yeah, I'm thinking through all of that
yeah,
stuff, and I think there has been a growing self awareness without needing always for Jazz to be
mm,
like rebuke. I think the spirit will do some
yeah,
rebuking
yep,
in me before things happen and as things
yeah,
happen. And I drop the ball every day,
mm,
but I would say that's the nature of things of how they kind of. unfolded and becoming more aware of my patterns of
Mm.
behaviors. And I think also, man, I got, a handful of friends who got kids in my age park,
Yeah.
ballpark. And so I'm able just to observe what they do. And I go, oh, that's a good way to navigate that
Yeah.
situation. Okay, if that happens with me, I should probably follow that
Yeah.
pattern. And yeah, man, I not jealous, but I just be like, dang, like why you so good at that? Like
Mm.
at being a dad in that
Yeah.
way or with that type of
Yeah.
response. I want to be like
Yeah.
that. And that's the repetition and imitation piece,
Yeah.
right? So I would say, yeah,
Mm.
that's the gist for the most
Mm.
part that I'm aware of.
Yeah. Dude, getting those eyes on you in the real parts of your life, man. That sounds so essential.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I would
Yeah.
say, I never really had much of an issue with projection of certain father wounds onto
Yeah.
God. You know what I mean? Where I'm like, man, God ain't gonna show up to do X, Y, and Z. My dad said he's gonna pick me up, but he ain't pick me up. So if God says X, Y, and Z in the scriptures,
Mm.
like, I don't know if I can really trust
Mm.
that. It's like, nah, bro. I never really had much of that outside of I'm always afraid to talk to God.
Mm.
And there were instances where I was afraid to talk to my
Yeah.
dad because I was afraid of how he would
Yeah.
respond. And I've seen, oh, if I don't try to navigate that with my relationship with my dad, one, and then two, with God, how can I expect my kids not to feel that way about
Mm.
me? Because inherently I'm going to repeat
Yeah.
patterns if I'm unapproachable or X, Y,
Yeah.
and Z. I feel like I'm a pretty approachable dude in general,
Yeah.
but that doesn't exempt me from being formed into a person who becomes more unapproachable. And so that's how I used to see God, especially if I was in sin and I'm like, oh man, you know, I did it
Mm.
again, Lord. I watched them
Yeah.
videos in X, Y, and Z. I can't even talk to you. I'm too ashamed because I feel like the response is going to be you're pissed off at
Yeah.
me, you're ashamed of me, or X, Y, and Z. Not that those things were things that my dad would
Yeah.
tell me, but that was the fears that came up. And so there's been a healing journey from my perspective on God in the ways that I have projected. But I'm grateful it hasn't been like a wholesale
Yeah.
projection toward God. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, man, I'm still healing from a lot
Yeah.
of that, and still going like, oh no, like God, I could chop it up
Yeah.
with you, in reverence and
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
stuff. But
Yeah. Right.
like,
Right. Right.
you are Abba,
Yeah.
and I'm okay with that now, and I think I know how to navigate that relationship better
Man.
because I know how to navigate my relationship a little better with my earthly
Yeah.
father.
And I love that story of you sharing that at your wedding, it kind of began that journey of healing with him. Um,
Yeah.
and it seems like he kind of had some growth and he had some formation happen in his life. Um, and
Yep.
that's so beautiful,
He's a
man.
different
Yeah,
man.
that's
He's a very different man than when he was when I first came onto the scene. He's
mm,
a very different man.
yeah,
And I call that redemption. Even though he doesn't follow Jesus, even though he has a whole different set of ideas and ideologies, um, he and I chop up about spirituality in
yeah.
general and faith. And he's actually come to respect my faith,
Wow.
which is not something that was there when I was a teenager, when I was trying to figure this whole thing
Yeah.
out, or even just investigate Christ and his way of life in general. And so, yeah, man, I'll be throwing some stuff at him sometimes, and he'd be like, "No, I hear that. I hear
Mm,
that." I'm like,
yeah.
"Word,
Like I
word." So there's healing on all types of cylinders, but
yeah,
it's been amazing. I've been around for more than half of his
yeah,
life, and so I've seen him grow as a
yeah,
human, and I go, "Okay,
yeah.
I can see a trajectory where I will continue to grow as a human because I have an example in that."
Wow. Man, we only got a few minutes left, but I wanna end with
Yeah.
something and get your take on this and get your voice into it. And you're
Hmm.
talking about, you know, that moment of healing of probably generations of trauma and wounds and so much going on there. What would you maybe
Yeah.
say to the young man right now who is in the midst of that? And, they may be in a quite different scenario. They may have a dad who will never pop back up in their life for reasons of actual death or just relational death. Um,
Hmm.
what would you say to that kind of individual, speaking from your experience, encountering a little bit of that resentment, little bit of that bitterness? Because I imagine any who have walked through that journey are carrying that right now. I'm very curious
Mm.
to hear insight input as to what you would maybe tell them.
Man, that's a good question. I would say, as you consider the traumas of your relational
Mm,
wounds, or potentially the death of a father, the relational death of a father, even if he's still alive, the absenteeness of a father, the fracturedness, or whatever it could look like, as you consider and work through the trauma that you have experienced, at least consider the traumas that he may have experienced
mm,
and how that impacted your relationship with him. And I think that would give, even if you've never known your dad,
mm.
because I literally know some people who are like, man, I never met my dad a day in my life.
Yeah.
And some have been like, okay, I'm cool off that. And others have been like, man, I can't stand that dude. Why wouldn't you ever be around? I would just say, even if you don't even have a context for understanding their traumas, that's one
Mm,
thing. But if you do have a context, that's all I would say is just consider those
mm,
things. Not that it excuses, erases any pain, heartache, or anything, but I think it provides a fuller
mm,
perspective that will allow you to see things that God may be able to
mm.
see that we don't have a foresight or a foreknowledge or even an after knowledge on, because we are limited in our perspective. So, and other than that, man, take your
Yeah.
time. If you're working through a relational wound, if you're working through a relational reconciliation potentially, if you've never met your dad, had a relationship with him, take your time with all of
Mm,
that and allow God to work with you through that
yeah.
stuff. There are men in this world who will step into that
Mm,
role if you need it,
yeah.
and take your time to find them.
Mm,
If you can't find it in your biological pops or your adoptive father or your foster father, there are men in this world who are willing to stand in that gap. But take your time to find them.
mm,
But you need them.
yeah.
You need them. You need them. So that's my three
Yeah.
cents.
Man, with inflation, that
So
3 cents is $1 million, bro.
yeah.
That's some weight behind your
Yo.
words in our time together, man.
Mm,
Wow.
mm,
Wow, dude. Gosh. Well, Hakeem, man, I think I could probably talk to you for another hour and a half. For the
mm,
sake of people listening, we'll keep it at our
yeah.
45-minute mark. Um, but dude, thank you
Yeah,
so
man.
much for just your vulnerability today and
Mm,
really just allowing yourself and your journey, your process to be spectacle is not the right word, you know what I'm saying? But
mm.
to
Yeah,
really
yeah.
allow it to be this moment for so many that I imagine, and I've told you about this, bro. Um, like I know this to be a fact. Like there's a kid in my neighborhood right now, who my wife and I have developed a relationship with, and we love him to death. And just
Mm,
recently, his dad re-entered the picture of his life, and
mm,
he sounds very similar to your context where he's kind of popping in and out. He doesn't live there,
mm,
um,
mm,
and he's somebody I have in mind that hopefully one day he listens to something like this, or somebody from his kind of story
mm,
listens to something like this, and they can know that, hey, the things I've been through, the things my family has been through, the generational hurt, the wounds, the depth, and for all the people that don't have the language for that, hopefully this gives them the language for that. Um, you
mm,
said something in our phone call, and it's stuck with me to this day, and it's that your generational wounds don't have to be a period, but can be a comma.
mm.
Poet scholar,
Oh,
bro.
I
I'm
said
telling
that.
you, poet scholar. And I think I want to title this conversation that because I think that really
mm,
summarizes everything you're saying and
mm,
the depth of really that healing that you can heal from the generational wounds you were experiencing through decisions that maybe you've decided to make or decisions imprinted upon you that were outside your
yeah.
choices. But from what you're saying today, man, and what you've shared, it really gives me hope. And I believe it's going to give many hope that not only can you heal, but there can be redemption there. When you said that word, bro, I was like,
Mm,
that's it. Redemption is written
mm,
all over this. I love it, man.
mm. Amen. Amen. Thanks for dang, I said that, bro. That's a bar
Yeah, I
right there.
know. I know. I'm
That's a
stealing that. So you can take
bar.
post scholar. I'm gonna take the
Hey, word.
comma period thing. Okay.
Say no more. Say no more, man. Thank you for chit chatting. This conversation is a piece of healing for me too.
Mm, mm.
So yeah, and I pray that anybody who may listen, man, is helpful to some degree or helpful to somebody
Yeah.
else. So
Yeah, man. That's
grace and peace,
Yes,
man.
sir. That's the prayer and the hope, bro. Well, that wraps up our time, Hakeem. Man, I love you. Thank you for the conversation
Love you
today,
too, bro.
bro. And
Yeah, man.
dude, we're just praying for you as you continue venturing into fatherhood and uh, dude, just the journey you're on.
Mm.
And yeah, bro. Is there any way people can keep up with kind of what you're doing with Bible Project, with your blog, with kind of the things you're putting out there? Because it's amazing, man. Is there any way we can plug that?
Well, yeah, you can go to BibleProject.com, tap into anything that we do in our organization. Um, and I just got a couple things, a blog that you can find on
Okay.
HakeemBradley.com. It's called Roots and Streams, something that I'm just now starting out. I got some thoughts, and I just want to
Yeah.
share 'em. Biblical reflections, personal experiences, all of that. But yeah, if y'all interested, you can tap
I
in.
love it, man.
But definitely tap into the Bible
Yes.
Project for
Yes.
sure.
You said Tim
Please.
Mackey. I'm the real one putting out the stuff. Just kidding. He's just the face. He's just the face for the brand. Just kidding.
It's my dude, man. It's my
He's the
dude.
guy for sure.
Indeed.
All
Indeed.
right, bro. Well, that wraps up our time, man. Um, dude,
So,
love you, bro.
love you too,
All
man.
right. And hey, thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode. If you want to show your support for the show, please feel free to give a rating and a review. It helps the show out tremendously. If you want to go one step further, please share on your social media platforms. But with that, that's all we got. So we'll see you later.